All right, let's call it. It's 7:30. We'll call the meeting to order. So the first thing we have is upcoming meetings. Upcoming meetings are August 17th is our next meeting, and then the second Wednesday of each month following. We have two sets of outstanding minutes. I've seen the June 8th minutes go around. So I want to ask Pam, do you feel that those are ready for review?
Yeah, I think, well, everyone responded. Thank you very much. I'm trying to keep these simple and I'm not editing heavily. I want to get them out with accuracy. So I hope if anybody has any problems with that, do let me know. I also assume that once we've approved, then the attachments will be taken care of subsequently, and I trust that's the way it goes. But yes, and just I think it's also good to keep in mind what the backlog, to the extent that exists, is every time we meet. And I think right now we need one June meeting to be reported.
Yeah.
I also think it is a good idea to try to have a schedule so that, maybe I get them within 2 weeks, I get them back to you within a week, you get them back to me, so that we maybe overcome the backlog problem. But, again, this is an aspiration of mine.
Yes, and you're doing a good job of staying on top of it. And so on the agenda, I list any outstanding minutes so that when we see, 3 or 4 dates listed on the agenda, that means we're falling behind. And I'm comfortable with 2 June meetings being listed with 1 ready for approval, which is great.
I will just say, I don't want to belabor this, but I'm not particularly comfortable with that. I think they should be turned around more quickly. I don't think 2 is, I think we should try to get things done timely. So I don't want to establish a practice of considering that to be the desirable outcome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And do we want to have a discussion about any of the minutes? Do board members have any edits to the June 8th minutes that they may want to suggest? No? Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the June 8th that were circulated by Pam.
Do I have a second? I see Alice said a second. Great, I'll do a roll call vote. Pam?
Yes?
Wendy?
Yep.
Alice?
Yes.
Warren?
Abstain.
Abstain, great. And I also approve. So we've approved the June 8th minutes. And now we're going to go on to a chair's update. I really don't have much of an update right now because I think Dave is going to cover most of what I would discuss. So I am going to skip the chair's update and we'll move on to Dave.
Thanks. So I sent around director's update yesterday. CMLP's now making larger weatherization rebates available for lower income households. The standard households can get up to $1,000 per calendar year on households. Depending on household size and income, the lower income are eligible to get $1,500 to $2,000. So that's something new. We have 5 Concord residents that have received rebates for the electric lawnmowers. So we're excited about that. That started in early June. So we're hoping to get some more uptake on that, but it's a good start anyway. We've received over 400 heating and cooling coaching requests, which is excellent. As you might recall, we started that in February of 2021. We're able to document 48 heat pump installations so far in 2022. And if you compare that to 2021, that's about 68% of what we did in 21. So definitely having a good uptick on that. We spent about 110,000 of the budget, 153,000 so far. And we have another 24 heat pump projects planned by customers that are currently heating with oil, propane, EPS, or electric resistance. So, things are going well there. I also included in the update, an email that we received from a heat pump customer that got coaching. We get these regularly. I see at least one a week, but just wanted to share with the board the type of feedback we're getting on the coaching. I think it's important and kind of shows the type of service that we're providing the customers.
And so Dave, you're getting a lot of positive feedback on the coaches, is that right?
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing, feedback, I want to say, once every week or two, and we haven't had any negative feedback yet, but the coaches are doing a great job, and I think it's a good service for the community. On the operation side, I'm pleased to, report that Emerson Hospital switchgear repairs are 100% complete and they're back in service. So that's very, very good news for us. We're happy about that. On the advanced metering project, we've had legal reviews, the proposed contract. They've made several suggested changes, and we shared those with the vendor. We had a meeting with the vendor to go through those changes. They've agreed to a number of them. We have a handful of changes that they need to look at their legal team and get back to us, but we're definitely making good progress to get towards a finalized contract. So moving in the right direction on that one. Once the contract is finalized, we'll issue a PO and kind of go from there. Internally, we're looking at total number of meters, types, and all that. We make sure we order what we need to order, including small inventory for spares, which is standard practice. Commonwealth Avenue streetlights, we're replacing the ones in the downtown area in the West Concord Business District. Crews started that. We've replaced 4 lights so far. We have 2 other ones in progress. It requires, a disconnect, remove a light, put a new base in, and then install the pole and the light. So it's each one takes a bit of time, but so far so good. They look nice, and placing ones that are scheduled to be replaced because of their age. In June, the contract was executed between the state and the town for the level 3 charging grant. So what we did after that was executed as we got pricing. Pricing was definitely higher than what we got when we submitted the grant. And the pricing range from the vendors for the level 3 charger alone range from $81,000 to $165,000, depending on what type of charger we're looking to get. So working through that, but the idea is to get that finalized and get a PO issued. We have 12 months from when the contract was executed to get the charging station installed, and we do have some conduit work to do to provide that with power. So quite a bit of work there.
Just a quick question on the level 3 charger. Will you be partnering with a company like ChargePoint or EVgo, or will it be operated as a sole level 3 charger for CMLP?
I'm pretty sure we're going to be partnering with a company. Which one is yet to be determined, but yeah, I mean, all of our charging stations in town right now are ChargePoint. That doesn't mean we're going to stay with ChargePoint, but we could. And that's some of the things we're looking at. And, price is a major factor in what the product we get is important. The grant is good for up to $100,000. So, we're going to have some skin in the game. We're going to spend more than $100,000, but I want to make sure that, we're as close to 100,000 as we possibly can be. And that's with the equipment and labor and the line extension to feed this. So quite a bit to do coming up, but moving in the right direction. And try and keep that going. On Monday, Brian, Alice, and I had a virtual stakeholders meeting with Concord Middle School Solar Storage Project. The meeting included SMMA, SDA, board members, middle school committee members, superintendent, and myself. We discussed a number of topics, such as array size, interconnection, solar location, potential design revisions, CMLP electric distribution system extension, to name a few. Meeting was very good, very informative. I think it was needed, and I think everyone got something out of it. I don't know if Alice or Brian want to add to that, but please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I was happy with the fact that we had all the key stakeholders on the call, and we were able to get into the details of what is solar ready, who does what, when, and so forth. So it was very productive, and it's all aimed towards getting all the stakeholders on the exact same page so that we can do a public meeting about this in a month or 2 months from now, to share with the public exactly where we are in that project, and just talk about the solar side of the middle school project. Alice, do you want to add?
I would like to add, I have to say that it was probably one of the most amazing meetings I've been to, because it really called for the need for coordination among all the parties. Because as you think about it, a project like this, we've heard citizens ask us to maximize the solar potential at the site, and there are pros and cons to doing it that go far beyond the cost of the project. And I think those were highlighted, and that is, some of it is the coordination effort. That was something, if you think about from a design standpoint, of building a school of $101 million or whatever it is, there are design constraints that say that if we maximize the site, you'll impact the design integrity of the building itself. So you may not be able to find the front door because you've got solar panels obstructing the view. And so there are multiple concerns that need to be addressed and considered when we think about, quote, maximizing the solar potential. That solar potential is weighed against other design and site characteristics. And I think that was something I took away as broadening the perspective of how and why we may not be able to maximize, because there are other constraints in the site. I thought, although a lot of the conversation was above my pay grade, very detailed analysis of the conduits needed and where the wires go to the building versus CMLP. The concept was well received, that this coordination was extremely important and will continue as we go on. Those are the kinds of things I just wanted to, the high level parts of the conversation I wanted to relay.
All right, thank you. On the personnel side, we've successfully hired a grade 1 line worker. They'll start on Monday the 18th, so that's great. That leaves us with 2 open positions. So we're getting back to full staff, which is very important on our end. We've also completed first round interviews for the customer service rep position. We have 4 candidates we're bringing in tomorrow for second round, so that's moving along quite well, and hopefully we'll get those positions filled as well. And that's my update. Any questions, please let me know.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to move on to broadband update. Jason, do you have an update available?
I do. Thank you. So I did submit an update in the packet, and you guys should see that. I have been getting a lot of questions about availability of those, so I have posted all of the previous and the current update on the town's website on the broadband page. So if anyone wants to go to concordma.gov/broadband, there's a page on the left hand of that submenu that says monthly updates. So regarding the hiring of the telecom director, things did not work out with the candidate in that round of hiring, so we have reposted the position. In discussing it with Carrie and Dave, we realized that the title of the position itself is a bit of a liability, because we were getting applicants from backgrounds that weren't necessarily in line with what the job description included. It being called Telecom Director, we had a lot of people who had phone system experience but didn't know anything about broadband or necessarily managing a business. Also, because it was a director level position, we were getting people who had, managed staff of hundreds and hundreds, as opposed to sort of being directly engaged with operational staff. So we've changed that title to Broadband Manager to better reflect the responsibilities and duties that's in the job description, but we didn't change the job description in any other way, and that is pending approval by the Personnel Board. But we're hopeful that this change is going to get a candidate pool that's more reflective of the responsibilities and be successful when we move forward to hire. We've implemented a new feature in June that allows people directly to book a walkthrough themselves after they submit an interest form for Concord Broadband. So historically, you would submit an interest form, and then it would be up to our staff to call and then usually leave a message and then play phone tag for a while and then schedule a walkthrough. And if the person needed to change that appointment or cancel it, then they wouldn't know who necessarily to call, or they would leave the message with the wrong person. Our staff would show up and waste their time. So now individuals can book that themselves and make updates to that, reschedule or cancel at their will. And that has proved really successful so far. In fact, over 95% of the people who submit an interest form went on to automatically moved on to the next step of booking that appointment, and they've been showing up and they've been rescheduling if they need to. So it's taking a lot of burden off of our staff and allowing them to have some days like an hour a day is now freed up to do additional installs or other work and coordination instead of having to do this administrative task. So that's been really successful. And it was also part of our Microsoft 365 platform, which came at no additional cost to us, and it integrates nicely into everyone's calendars. So it was a win-win for everyone here. This month, our third-party partner did pull additional fiber to about a dozen locations who were interested in Concord Broadband. These are they're just getting the fiber from the splice case too close to the residence or business, and they're usually in technically difficult locations that would require a bigger crew and sometimes a police detail. And these are jobs that typically we kind of lump together because of how we require those police details, and we don't want to have a detail for just a single pull. And this is already showed to be really successful. In fact, we had something like 31 installs in June, which was significantly higher than the previous months. And that was in large part because we had that fiber ready to go and we had already pre-spliced it. So, by the time we set up the appointment with the customer, it was just an hour or two to get everything ready. So that model seems to be working out pretty well, and we'll continue that going forward and see how it works. We have some pretty big maintenance coming up next week, and I highlighted this in the update, and we've also initiated our notification protocol, which we now have documented. So if you recall, in December of last year, we suffered an outage in the Losbrook area due to rodents chewing through several cables in an LCC, which is a cabinet that's on a pole on Losbrook. So at the time, we respliced the customers who were active customers on those fibers, but we didn't actually cut out the damaged fiber and replace it because that was going to be a really big job. There are almost 400 fibers to splice, which, splicing an individual fiber can take a couple minutes. So that's a lot of work to do. And it requires coordination. We typically schedule that work after hours. So we've got our third party coming in to assist us. We'll have probably 3 personnel on site plus other people helping remotely to coordinate that. It's going to directly impact 55 customers. And using some of the data that is now readily available to us, we've directly notified those customers by mail. And we'll also be blasting to anybody who's a member of Smart Hub, anybody whose email they've given to us for outage notifications, and also the typical routes on social media and the town's website to let people know. We don't anticipate a broader impact on the network, but we are notifying everyone just in the event that one of those fibers happens to carry, another cluster of customers that we didn't identify, and it's temporarily, down while we resplice that. Typically, when you cut it, the first customers can come back within minutes, and it can take up to 45 minutes to an hour for those 55 customers that we've identified. But we are going to have as many personnel doing that at the time as possible to minimize the downtime, and it will be roughly between 1 and 3 a.m. that they do the splices for those customers. And we're going to try to focus on the dark fiber or things that don't carry customer data early on in the evening, starting at 8 p.m. We're also doing one other piece of maintenance during that window, which is moving our DHCP servers from the town's network over to co-located equipment that's at our substation. So it'll be more under broadband control and less reliant on the storage and network of the town. So if the town's doing maintenance on their servers, it's not going to impact customers or create some of the complexity that we saw that delayed the response to the outage last year. Brian, did you have a question on the maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, this having this rodent get into the box sounds quite expensive. If you're paying staff a few minutes per wire and you're doing quite a lot of wires, what preventive measures or protective measures have you done to avoid any rodents getting into and repeating this
Yeah,
thing?
we spent a lot of time on that starting in about February. We had regular conversations about that. So we've worked with our underground crew over on the electric side to help seal all of the conduit. These are cabinets that are on boxes, and so there usually is a hole where the fiber cables come through, and there's usually a gap in that hole. So we've gone through systematically to all 40 of our LCCs and sealed that with materials that rodents can't get through. We've also considered other things to do, like things that the cable operators do in terms of getting fiber away from trees so that squirrels can't easily just climb on it and then climb down to the LCC. We've also looked at different types of cable that are more chew resistant to be used down the road when we do need to replace some of this core fiber. And yeah, we have regular conversations about that. But this particular issue that happened can't happen again now that we've sealed all these cabinets. But we do have future measures that we hope to implement in terms of preventing a similar situation with it being chewed. And I will say that this was part of the smart grid original fiber that was installed and paid for by the electric side of things. This was not some of the more recent broadband fiber that was added. Let's see. And in terms of the yeah, I covered the DHCP. And then just in the update, there's a couple additional metrics. One whole page dedicated to financials, and then a breakdown of the different class of services that our customers have in terms of speeds. We are looking at that. We've gotten a lot of feedback recently of people who are interested in faster speeds than we offer, specifically in the residential side of things. They don't want to have to become a business customer because they're not a business and they just want those faster speeds. We have adequate bandwidth for that. So we're looking at ways to do that without necessarily complicating things by adding too many tiers of service. But we are looking at that and the breakdown of our customers versus how many have expressed interest in maybe moving to a faster speed. And then in terms of metrics, we're also focusing on ways to clarify some of those, because our business is a little bit unique in that when you look at churn, for example, this is the rate of people who leave your business. And those are lumped together today between people who move and people who go to another carrier. And those are very different scenarios, and we want to track those separately. And today they're sort of lumped into customer closed account. So we can't do anything about the people who move, but we can do something about the people that find our service inadequate versus a competitor, whether it's the speed offerings or the price or some other situation. So we're now separating those so that we can see exactly how many people are leaving for a competitor versus those people who are just moving. And it'll also allow us to track those people who are moving to make sure that if they move within Concord, we can reach out to them and make sure that they have broadband available if they want it.
We're also able to market to the person moving in,
Right.
who is probably the easiest customer to collect.
Right. Yeah. And then another nuance we're working on is take rate. So that's the percentage of people who are currently taking the service from Concord Broadband relative to the total number that we have available. But as we know, some people have ready to go service. They can call us, we can go give them a box and turn it on. Other people, we need to do a little bit of work before we get them there. And then other people, they need to install conduit or there's some other financial barrier to that service. And we want to kind of identify those so that when we look at that percentage and we say, for instance, 25% of people who have broadband available are taking it from Concord, You know, we want to be able to split that out to say, well, there's also another 8% of people that if they were ready to go, if they had no cost to them, they would take the service today, just so that we can identify that, and it will help us with our capital planning. So that was the update that I had, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Warren, you have a question?
Yeah, yes, excuse me. I suspect other folks know the answer to this, but I don't because I'm new. Looking at the chart in the table on expenses, it seems like expenses have risen significantly over the past couple of years. Why is that? And is that a trend we're going to expect to continue?
Matt's he's on vacation this week, but you know, I can tell you in general, there were some staffing increases. We added a 4th tech and a 2nd engineer, and we had a manager director at the time. So personnel costs had gone up a little bit. It also allowed us to do additional installs and take in additional revenue. And then there were also some one-time, you know, upgrades and purchases that were made to get the network, you know, equipment installed and things like that. Dave, do you have any other insight into that, or did that kind of capture it?
No, that is what the additional expenses was.
We don't anticipate it increasing, you know, beyond the staffing levels we have today. And in fact, we had 4 technicians and we're down to 3, and we're going to hold at that 3 level for a while to see if utilizing a third-party contractor for some of that work that we don't have to pay in the winter months when we don't do as many installs will be a better model going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? All right, seeing no questions, we can move on. Mark, are you ready?
Sure, I am. Thank you. Good morning. Dave, would you enable me to share?
Just give me 1 second.
No problem. So
Should be good now.
Great, thank you. I had the pleasure of being able to chair the broadband fiber completion task force, and we completed our work already. Just for scheduling reasons, we're coming to you. But what I thought we would do this morning is just briefly review what we presented to the select board back on June 13th, which is a summary of our report, and then try to leave a few minutes for some discussion. So I would assume at this stage of the game, since it's been out you know, over a month, you've had a chance to look at the report and may have some questions that you want to talk to. So just really briefly, the Fiber Completion Task Force was created as a result of Town Meeting Article 2041 in 2021. And the charge really was to investigate what it might take to complete fiber around the town. There is a task force webpage on the town's website. The URL is listed there. Just look for Fiber Broadband Completion Task Force, and the full report is available for download there, as well as some of the data that I'll allude to here. We looked at who actually gets fiber and broadband today. We looked at possible costs for achieving a broader deployment of the fiber optic network, and we considered what the affordability of that was as all as part of our work. Our key findings were that Concord has significant gaps in the fiber service. There are over 20% of premises, meaning either businesses or residents, that are not actually served by the fiber network today. It would be expensive to get to everyone, and we readily acknowledge that there may in fact even be some parcels where, you know, it's functionally not possible. So, you know, 100% completion may never occur, but there are also plenty of opportunities for expansion of the broadband network that are, you know, affordable and would be considered desirable. Our review of the finances indicated that there is reason to be cautious at this stage. There are, some debt issues that have been uncovered that really, in our opinion, need to be investigated before making any major commitments. Our recommendations fall into a number of categories. I think in the end had 7 different ones, but policies which we would expect boards like the select board and the light board to weigh in on, and they primarily go in the direction of what are the goals of the program. I was able to watch your June 22nd meeting and really enjoyed the sort of fulsome discussion that you're as a board having about what is the placement of solar, what are the goals for our electric system, and how are we working to meet those goals. And I would, our recommendation is that similar parallel discussions need to be had. Where does the broadband network and service fit in? It's a revenue generating opportunity. It's a business. And that strategic planning really needs to be established through a process that is a dialogue between staff and the community about what the goals are. We recognize that there were significant gaps in the metrics that are available for running the business. You just got an update from Jason. I would hasten to say that Jason has readily enthusiastically adopted some of the goals around getting those metrics, and they're beginning to come in. And that's very important because understanding where the business is and its status is really important. And with those metrics, governance can be enabled. And once the metrics are understood, then it's possible to really do that plan. We did make some specific financial recommendations. We believe that there's good documentation that suggests that at least $240,000 in revenue was not recognized or not available to the broadband business as a result of slowdowns of installations due to the pandemic. And so we're strongly urging the town manager and the select board to consider providing relief for that through the ARPA recovery grant program. And that allocation discussion is something that I think the select board should go forward with. Given some of the investments that are likely to need to be made in order to expand the fiber network, having these resources available would allow for a jump start in that. Also, the payment in lieu of franchise, which is an inter-fund transfer between broadband and the Minuteman Media Network Fund, at least given the current state of the finances of the broadband business, appears to be both optional in that it's completely at the discretion of the budgeting entities to decide that, and somewhat unnecessary given the strong financial situation that Minuteman Media Network is, and the maybe less than ideal situation that broadband is in. So we would encourage you to take a position against continuing that line item. It was a new item added to the budget a couple of years ago. We recommend some improvements in the budget and capital planning, particularly integrating with the roads program, so that some of the areas of town where fiber is not available and digging up the street is really the answer. Close coordination of and trying to make sure that those opportunities aren't missed means that residents that don't have service for that reason may be able to get service as normal town maintenance goes on. That's an efficient way to do that. And we are also recommending that some of the techniques be looked at with an eye towards trying to find cheaper ways to deploy fiber. So that's kind of a summary of our recommendation. I know that in the interest of time, I don't want to go through all of these things, but we did boil down using the GIS data provided by the IT department, sort of the real stats about what parcels are have fiber, and you'll see the number 61 and 31 come up. That appears to be the number of parcels that are available. There are some parcels like open space that one wouldn't be concerned about. And there's roughly 9,000 parcels altogether. Multi-dwelling units, meaning the apartments and condominiums, are disproportionately unserved in Concord, as well as certain geographic areas that have to do with construction. And so our report contains a fairly detailed analysis of that, which would be useful for coming up with plans and more detailed cost estimates. So as resources become available, if resources become available and the goals are set to do so, it would be possible to plan that. Some examples of what that looks like using the geographic system are on the screen right now. The two areas that we're looking at are the Abbott Lane, which is an example on the right-hand side of the screen of sort of a condominium or multi-dwelling unit sort of situation. It's a small number of parcels with a large number of units where fiber could be pushed into that and potentially increase the availability to customers, as opposed to the Madison Drive Alfred Circle, which is shown on the left-hand side of the screen at the moment, where we have a large number of parcels in an area where electric is already underground. And so more extensive construction would need to be done. So that's just, we were able to identify 52 of these areas. Some of these projects could be costed out and could potentially be put into some kind of program that was geared towards pushing that. The data is also presented in the report in a tabular format. We do think that the investment model needs to be looked at. There's, the value of a customer and the amount to be invested. Broadband started out conservative in this area and could probably relax the criteria a little bit to enable some slightly higher investment to try to capture a higher number of customers. This is the calculation for the ARPA for the pandemic revenue losses. And so we identified really 6 specific things that we think are of the highest importance to address, not necessarily in the order presented here, but from a policy perspective, just establishing what we might mean by universal access when, really having a policy level conversation amongst the community about how far are we trying to push this. Is it a goal to get broadband or fiber availability to all residences and businesses? That's something that the select board, town meeting, and citizens need to decide. We do think that tracking installations, as Jason is already beginning to do, is extremely important from a metric perspective to try to make sure that the business is continuing to grow. And continuous monitoring of those metrics and looking at the progress does appear to be something that we would urge the light board to continue to do and make a habit of. ARPA relief funding would certainly be helpful in getting a coordination with the roads program and some strategic fiber installations done. There is the matter of the internal loan that is on the broadband books. One of the new expenses, meaning in the last couple of years, is the finding as a result of an audit a couple of years ago that broadband owes the light plant. In other words, the broadband fund internally owes the light fund almost $1.8 million. If that is actually the case, and I know that staff is looking to examine that, then it really does cast a very different light on the profitability of this particular enterprise. And so it's critically important to really get under that. If it turns out that is the case, then the debt repayment schedule for that which is currently in place as a result of the 2020 policy of the light plant, will significantly hamper the ability of the broadband business to construct any new fiber for at least a decade. So that's an incredibly important thing to get under and understand as early as really the next budget cycle. And we do think that really since its inception, the debt financing for capital investment in fiber has been generally too short given the useful life of the fiber. And we would recommend that the Light Board, the Finance Committee, and town staff consider using longer term debt instruments to finance fiber. So I'm going to kind of stop there and take any questions that you might have, hoping to keep you on time.
I have one question, but I see that Wendy also has a question. So I'm going to let Wendy go ahead.
So I just want to comment because I am a member of the Financial Audit Committee, and the question about this loan came up, and I just want to give the board a status update that Carrie, with support of the auditors, are creating sort of a special project, if you will, to go back and look at the details behind that was originally behind the dollar figure that was created. So I hope there's more to follow, but I think people heard the recommendation very clearly and are acting quickly on it. So I'm hoping that in the next meeting, there'll be another update that I can share if Dave doesn't know more, but people are acting on that. So just want people to be aware. Thanks.
And on that point, this board can choose to suspend the a yearly payment from one account to the other if a broadband project needs funding, and this is a burden to the broadband business. So we have that ability. It's great that we're looking into the details of that. I wanted to ask a question about, you had a slide there that showed some of these multifamily communities, which some of them are structured where they look like a residential street, like a developer in the 80s or 90s built a development and they put underground utilities, but they didn't put a conduit for broadband. Do we know which of those roads are public roads and which ones are private? And do we have the DPU involved in, a normal repaving may happen at one of those communities? And that would be the time to add that piece of conduit. And I want to make sure that that got highlighted in the report.
I think that the first step is that, just simply identifying the areas and getting them onto a list as identified areas was a good start. The GIS analysis helped us do that. And I think at this stage of the game, the telecom staff and telecom engineering can sort of take over from here and follow up and look for those opportunities. It is a complicated subject in the sense that sometimes they are private ways and private roads, and what the repaving schedule isn't always available. So there's a pretty, let's call it, complex program that needs to be put in place in order to achieve that. And the investment model that we started with was very much just about sort of single family houses, and we didn't really think through, is it possible to take a look at something like that area and say, oh, there's 24 potential customers there. If the take rate is 25%, that means 6 customers. If we're willing to invest $2,000 or $4,000 in per customer that we're going to get, does that mean that there's an available budget of $12,000, $15,000, $20,000 to actually do a conduit project with an eye towards getting there? And these are very similar to the exact conversations that you're going to find yourself grappling with when you think about charging infrastructure for these types of things. And in fact, there's probably an opportunity to coordinate fiber installation and charging infrastructure installation into properties like these properties. And so just pursuing it as an integrated planning opportunity is probably warranted here. And so we're hoping that we were able to contribute some small way to that thinking.
We've seen with other multifamily housing communities that it's very difficult because the trigger is their decision to repave their community, and we're not always in the loop on when that happens. And even when we are, there's who pays for what issues that also happen.
Just on that point quickly, Brian,
Yeah.
our suggestion is that it might make sense to come up with some kind of a revolving fund that would help to make sure that resources are available, kind of like we have the road repair revolving fund, and the ARPA money might be a good way to seed that so that as those opportunities come up, it's possible to act a little bit more quickly. Right now, the capital program for, especially on the fiber side, is very constrained. And so, an opportunity like that could come up and there simply wouldn't be any funding for it. In fact, there is no real funding set aside at the moment for fiber construction in any budget, really.
Well, let me ask Dave a clarifying question. So we have an underground fund, and that when an undergrounding project happens, we include the conduit for fiber, but not the stringing of fiber. The stringing of fiber would be the broadband business, but the underground fund would put the conduit into those communities. Is that
So just to be clear, the underground fund is funded from the electric rates through Mass General Law, Chapter 166. So, if we're going to convert an area, that's where the funds come from. We don't have a surcharge on the broadband side per Chapter 166. However, if we were undergrounding an area, we would put in fiber conduits. And that's been our practice for the last several years.
Yeah, and in the last several years, which budget? Well, I guess we recently separated the two. So when these underground projects happen, it's great to hear that the install happens for fiber, but that the cost of that install in the end, is that going to go to the broadband business, or is it part of that fund for undergrounding that electric collects for?
So, it's a tough question to answer completely because we have two different scenarios.
Yeah.
You have existing areas. Mark had mentioned Madison Drive. That's an underground area already. So underground funds aren't allowed to be used there. So that would come out of depreciation. And then if you look in the budget, when we do stuff like that, Barkus Farm, Wright Farm Road, Madison Drive is actually an area that we're looking at as well to put conduit in. That would come out of depreciation. If we were converting an area that's overhead, that comes out of the underground fund. And so when you look at it from a budget standpoint, we're excavating to put in electric conduits. That comes out of the electric budget. Throwing a fiber conduit in there, the materials, that's really what you're looking at, would come out of the broadband budget because the excavation's already happening.
So there is some funding from the broadband business, but it's materials mostly.
Yep.
And importantly, each road falls under different scenarios for budgeting and what funds can be used.
Correct.
Does the board have any more questions? Okay, Dave Allen, I'm gonna let you have a question because I know you're very enthusiastic about the broadband business. And
over a quarter century. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Brian. First, a point item, going back a few meetings, I produced a position on the pilot in lieu of franchise, most sharply agreeing with a position that Mark presented here. Is entirely inappropriate here, certainly in my view. I'll make that available to the board once again. I do hope steps will be taken to eliminate that. But much more broadly, this was very much the time for this effort. certainly in my view. And I personally am more than appreciative to these five for not only taking this on, but really doing a serious piece of work on it. I understand weekly meetings, and it shows in the report. Just really great thanks. The reason why it's so important is that when this was a startup, when it got pulled up out of the ground, quite literally, there simply couldn't be a focus on getting it to everyone in town. Now, once we've, relatively speaking, stabilized, it doesn't work anymore for, I believe I heard you right, Mark, that a quarter of the possible users don't have the possibility for getting this service. It doesn't work for us to have and have-nots. Certainly in our town, we need to do what we can in that regard. But of course, the major point is it's going to take a hell of a large investment to get us there, as has been the discussion here. I would encourage, I would request, I would suggest that the board, which is responsible for this, put that front and center, not just this discussion, meeting and so forth, but as a major target. How are we going to move from having haves and have-nots in a serious fashion and not let it take whatever, a quarter century or some such to get there? Yes, there may be a few that will never be able, but we can and we need to, and now's the time to put it at a high priority item for the board, if I may suggest. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Carlin Reed.
Thank you. Carlin Reed, 83 Whitsand. Just so that the record is completely clear, I would be remiss in not stating that as the chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee, I think it's an inappropriate response to remove the payment in lieu and franchise, because that reflects in part a payment from those broadband customers who are not Comcast customers and therefore do not pay into the PEG fund, which is a service that is offered throughout the entire town. The broadband customers essentially get the benefit of PEG without paying for it, and that's not fair. Furthermore, I would contest the charge that PEG can afford it, whereas broadband cannot. If you take a look at page 6 of the enterprise booklet from the town report, you'll see the enterprise has a an order of magnitude greater amount of revenues than the PEG fund does. And the PEG fund is already drawing down on its reserves to make sure that you folks get the good services that you deserve. Now, I also see that you're also over time, which is the first time in this meeting, Brian. You've been doing a very good job running it, so I will be quiet. Thank you much.
Thank you, Carlin. And Pam, can you make a quick comment? Because I do want to try to keep this on schedule.
Right. Is there a system for fining when the Concord Green just missed out? We just repaved. No more broadband, no running of conduits to the parking sheds for electrification. It's a tragedy and a real waste of money. And a discredit both to the town and to the Concord Green Board for doing so. I just want to
thank you, Pamela. Yeah, we tried to work with Concord Green in many aspects, and my understanding, which can be inaccurate, was that when that repaving was done, they stubbed in some conduit so that it wouldn't have to be torn up should something happen in the future.
No, very little was done.
All right.
And they threw out the idea of electrifying the parking sheds so that.
Well, Pamela, I'm sorry. I do want to keep us on schedule, and you can finish that electrification comment at the public comments at the end, if you wish.
No,
thank you.
Fine.
Does the board have any additional comments or questions on broadband? Mark, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, just finally, I'd just like to thank Scott Hopkinson, David Hessel, Gordon Brockway, and Gail Heyer for working so hard to get this. And you know, also very appreciative of the support that we got from Jason and his team and everybody at the town for allowing us to do this. I do hope that it does contribute to moving things forward. And just in brief response to Carlin's, we everyone on this particular task force is very supportive of what MMN does. My personal feeling is that we should probably be supporting MMN's activities directly out of the general fund, because if you don't buy Comcast, then you're not paying for MMN either. So that, you know, it's by no means a knock on the value of that service. It's just a matter of there's no way to replace the revenue that broadband spends on that in any other way, because it's really highly restricted. And so we need to focus on the mission of that.
Okay.
That would be our position.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move us on the agenda. We're only 6 minutes off, but it was a good discussion. I thank you, Mark, and the task force for all the work that was done. This is a lot of great information to help us moving forward. So the next topic on our agenda is the consultant scope of work for in-town solar. This is related to Article 38. And I just want to have a board discussion. I think we could actually make up some time here if we have a quick discussion, because this has been on the agenda previously. But what I'm hoping to do is get agreement amongst the board members on a framework for going forward on how we're going to structure this. So I'd like to have a discussion about the scope of work that was sent around in June that we've discussed before. It basically outlines, and I can, Dave, do you mind if I share my screen? I'll share the Word document that was sent around.
Yep, go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see if I can. So the scope of work that we kind of laid out previously and discussed had these 5 components. We discussed the value of a subcommittee to organize our thoughts, organize our past efforts, to summarize all this before we spend money on a consultant to do the same. I find value in a subcommittee because it needs detailed attention that I don't think this board can provide, and it also can engage some of those people in the public that have outstanding questions about why we're not putting as much solar in town, and they can understand some of the reasoning for the legitimate reasons why things can and can't happen. But I think it would be good to establish a small group, a handful of people that can gather and organize this information, that can prepare the questions for a consultant where a consultant is needed to have the expertise to come in and say, we understand the limitations of your current system, here's some industry solutions. But I want to hear from other members their thoughts on this process and how we would like to see that structured. Does any of the members want to give their opinion? Alice.
So I strongly favor the idea of having a citizen committee steer this project. There is a great deal of information that's already been collected, as you said, Brian. And having that all in one place and well understood would save us considerable money, I think, in developing that RFP for the technical skills that we may not have in figuring out the options for solar in this town. And I know we'll talk about some of those things later in this memo, but a citizens committee can also engage a larger group of people in the discussion about what we know, what we don't know. So I would support this as an approach to getting to the point of understanding what we need from a consultant that we don't have expertise in.
Excellent. Pam Hill.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that I think when we talked about this last time, there was a caution raised by Mary Hartman about the proliferation of committees. And I share that concern. I also, I think, asked at the last meeting whether the plant staff itself might be able to carry this forward. And I think, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you were answering positively that you are underway and able to do more of this than perhaps we might think you have. But so my basic point is real caution about proliferation of committees. They're extremely resource intensive things for both the committee and the staff that is responding to the committee. And I would be hesitant to support such a thing unless, you know, Dave, for example, said that would be extremely valuable. And I think we need to think about what the select board would think about such an idea.
Yep. So I have some thoughts on that, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. Warren.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if somebody could explain exactly what's being proposed that will get us to the goal of having recommendations by the end of the year, which is what I'm assuming we need to have. It seems hard to imagine us having a citizens committee that operates first, completes its business, and then we hire a consultant, and then we get recommendations by the end of the year, unless somebody could explain what timeline they're operating on.
So Warren, we already have acknowledged that the timeline of the end of the year is pressing to provide a plan and schedule. So I need to establish our process before going to the select board and FinCom to ask for more time to resolve this. So it's chicken and egg. You know, I need to know what we're going to do before I can ask for more time. But you're asking, well, we have to work within the time we're given.
Okay.
Yeah. Wendy.
Brian, I hear the comments about a citizen group, and I'm concerned about creating a citizen group, although I support it. But have we considered collaborating with members of CAB, for example, and having other participants who are equally fluent in some of these issues? So can we leverage other committee resources as well and collaborate? I know it's the charge of the light board, but that doesn't mean some of these other issues have already been discussed by the CAB, and the consultant agreements were sort of the charge of CAB. So
the issue there is it's not directly their responsibility, and we lost the director of sustainability. So the director of sustainability was doing a lot of work and has left us. Now we have in that organization. So that's why I'm leaning toward the subcommittee. It can have members from CAB. It could have members from the public. It could have anyone who we decide. I think that the petitioner should be part of the subcommittee because this is their request, and what I see this as is Article 38 was, we have a goal, we haven't been reaching the goal, we need to make a real effort to get back on track. I understand why we're not meeting that goal is a lot to do with how we manage the imbalance of supply of generation and demand. And we need to pull together what we have, ask a consultant how do we solve that imbalance problem so that we can create this plan and schedule and present. So it's a lot of work, and we do need to get started. We've talked about this a lot, and we seem to be in a quagmire on this one. So I want to kind of press for a decision here so that we can take some action, whether it be right or wrong, but just start moving and doing work. Do you still have more? You want to answer any? Sorry, when you want to make any statement, Wendy, before I move on to Alice?
no, I guess I wasn't aware that the sustainability director left. So thank you for that information. I wasn't aware the sustainability director left.
Yeah, she left at our last meeting on June 22nd was her last day. Alice.
But what I'd like to just suggest is that unfortunately, the Article 38 did not come with an allocation of funds for a consultant study. So the funds that we will be using have to come from the light board, the light plant's operating funds, or somewhere in the budget that had not already been appropriated. And some of the questions that I think we'll be asking of consultants are quite sophisticated. It's about grid integrity, grid stability, about solar storage capacity throughout the town and what that means to our current grid. I mean, there are big questions about how we manage the grid going forward when we have an increased solar capacity. So those I can imagine, but I don't know for sure that that's a fairly extensive study that will need to be conducted above and beyond meeting the metrics of Article 38. And maybe the article, when we present a plan, includes that whole process of going out and finding the right contractor to do the study and to do the analysis that we think is needed to see what are the impediments to support increased solar across town. And that's really what I think we're asking. We've heard about saturation problems and we need to look at that.
Yeah.
And I don't think a subcommittee can do that work, but they can identify the components of that study that need to be done. And I think you probably have outlined them on several different occasions, Brian, and I think that's probably really good.
Yeah, so that's exactly it, is that it's going to be expensive. It's going to require a consultant to figure out those the imbalance in generation demand on the distribution system. But what I don't want to spend money on a consultant for is fact finding, is summarizing what we've done in the past, because we've had over a decade of experience with solar. You know, I have a whole bunch of documents from Jill Appel, who no longer lives here, but was very active in solar during the Solar Challenge and other efforts. So the hope is that by creating this small subcommittee, that we get all of this information, kind of the easy stuff, the go find what we've done in the past, so that when we hand that to a consultant, we're not paying them, you know, $100 an hour to go repeat all that work. They have it there. They can focus on the hard questions of how do we update our distribution system? What is cost-effective methods for doing so, and for all the scenarios? Warren.
Yeah, I can't tell if Brian and Alice, you're making the same recommendation or two different recommendations. Brian, you keep talking about a subcommittee, which is something, at least in my mind, seems very small, maybe 3 people and a subcommittee of this group. And Alice, you're talking about a citizens committee. That seems to me, that sounds bigger, and folks that aren't already connected to the light board. Are you making the same recommendations or different ones?
So I'll speak for mine. I'm not recommending that we use a subcommittee of this board. There are 5 members on this board. And I'm not recommending that we do the work of understanding all the collected materials and coming up with a strategy for going forward. I think their petitioners may have an interest in being part of that subcommittee of a committee of the town that does that work and helps direct the missing pieces, as Brian has laid them out as well, for the study that we'll eventually have to do. So that's my opinion. If others have a different opinion, if members of this board have the time and are able to be a subcommittee to do all of that fact finding of the original research that's been done, I'd be open to that, but I'm thinking that we don't have that capacity in the board.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
My thoughts were a 3 to 5 person group. I don't necessarily, citizen committee, subcommittee, to me, they're semantics, but a 3 to 5 person with at least one of the members of this board and the petitioner. And then we would just simply do the gathering of information, the identifying of some questions, and then help with the process of hiring the consultant. And that group would remain and kind of be there should we need them through the rest of the process. But I see most of their effort is just going to be in creating the right questions to ask the consultant so we don't waste money on consultants researching things that are not of value. Ken, you've had your hand up. Thank you.
Just quickly, number one, I actually do think Warren's question is excellent because I think there is a difference between a subcommittee and a task force. Subcommittees they're existing committees, and you draw from people, and it doesn't create a new group of people, which would be a task force. And I'm particularly concerned about proliferating task forces. So I think a subcommittee of pre-existing committees, maybe very small with light plant representatives, light board representatives, climate action board reps, whatever. So I think that's where I would come out if we were creating such a thing. I also think, again, and I don't want to, put you on the spot, Dave, but the actual article talks about the light plant coming up with a framework. And I again ask the question, why we're going elsewhere. And if Dave says, this would be great, very helpful, that's one thing. On the other hand, if things are well underway to create this framework, I really question whether we are now doing something that is going to be maybe more complicating than it's worth. And finally, I would raise the question whether a framework needs to be all that complicated. I mean, we're just making a plan for how to get moving in a way. It depends on how you define the term. So anyway, enough said. Maybe Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to this, please don't if you don't, but I'd like your view.
I would really appreciate Dave's perspective on his role and how much we already know, because we have a lot of expertise on our staff already. And to hire a consultant, do we need a consultant? Is it a collaboration? I guess because Dave does have a lot of stuff that he knows about. So is there a perspective, Dave, that you have?
Well, quick comment before Dave. We've talked about this in previous meetings, and the problem is staff is stretched on so many other projects. And that is why we focus on the consultant. That was discussed in a previous meeting. So I just don't want to repeat questions, but Dave, go ahead and answer.
No, we've started working on this already. We have meetings. We have one later today. So we are working on it, and whether we need a consultant or not, we're not at that point where we've made that determination. It's possible that that's where we'll end up, but we understand what the petitioner is looking for. I think, Brian, you did highlight the time frame that is an issue for us. Yeah, so we're working on it right now. And I would hate to see duplicate work done. I think, doing the internal work first, and then if we do need a consultant, then, we go after it. But at this point, I'm not at a point where I think we need one or I think we don't need one. So that's kind of where we are.
Do or don't need a consultant or a committee?
Either.
Okay. So do you think that by the next meeting, you could pull together a presentation on past efforts, questions that need to be answered going forward, and do the work that we're suggesting for the subcommittee? And that's a heavy lift.
I don't think that's necessarily doable for the next meeting, maybe the meeting after. But I don't think we can get all that done by the next meeting.
All right. Yes, Alice.
So I think what I'm hearing from Dave is you think that you can do a full report without the need of either a committee or a consultant. You don't know about the consultant yet. Did I say that correctly? That you can do the work of what Article 38 is?
Yeah, I think, we're, like I said, we're well underway. We haven't made the determination if we need a consultant yet or not. We have plenty of expertise internally to go through that stuff. We understand the system, the constraints better than a consultant would. So, we're certainly positioning ourselves to get through that. But like I said, the time frame is difficult. We definitely can't get everything done in that time frame.
And so can I just add one more thing? So what I'd like to be able to understand is that we're not just going to identify constraints, because we've heard a number of those constraints. It's how to overcome the constraints to get to the end goal, which is increase solar in the town. So I know that there are problems. Do you feel like you're in a position, Dave, or you and the staff can resolve those constraints to overcome them to meet the goals of Article 38? Or that's where I was thinking that a consultant might be necessary to help us think about the path through those.
Yeah, so some of the constraints we've already identified and started working on how do you overcome them? So an example would be backfeeding the transmission system. We already have looked into that using Energy New England and their expertise, and we have answers on that. And they're going to present to the board when we're ready. That could be next meeting, it could be meeting after, but they already put a presentation together. They're ready. So we've looked at that. We have answers on how we approach that piece, which is probably the first critical piece, because going forward with adding more solar would create a backfeeding issue. So that's the first step, and we've already been through that process. And so those are the things that we're working on to figure out how to overcome some of these issues.
So Dave, I have to ask the question, if we dedicate resources, your resources, staff resources towards this effort of collecting past efforts and so forth, doesn't that distract you from the contracting and the other plethora of projects that we have you working on? That was why we went down the path of the subcommittees, because we didn't have the staff resources. I mean, we've known that we have constraints since we put in WR Grace over 5 years ago, and we haven't resolved those. And this led to an article at town meeting saying, you're not figuring out the problem. If we do that work now, and we have all of these other projects going on, something's got to give. And that's my big concern, is I would rather delegate this work than other work.
Yeah, so I totally understand what you're getting at, Brian. It makes a lot of sense. But one of the things that you need to keep in mind is when you do have consultants or contractors on board, that doesn't necessarily, relieve workload from staff.
Yeah.
So, look at the AMI project, staff is, working on that regularly, and we have a consultant that's working on it as well. So
Yeah.
it's not going to fully relieve staff by hiring a consultant. It would help in some areas for sure. And in many cases, we're going to have to educate the consultant on where we are. And, we have a better understanding of that than a consultant would.
I see your hand, Pam. Warren had his hand up earlier, so I'm going to let Warren comment, and then I'll go to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it could work well to, leave the ball in the staff hands for the moment. But what I would love to see for a presentation is something that takes the range of questions Brian had on that sheet and the range of issues that needs to be addressed, and basically puts it into 3 categories. One, the things you already know the answers to and have the information on. Second, the items where you feel with a little more time, you can develop the answers to those questions internally. And then the 3, the ones that it's going to be hard for you to get answers to, and therefore it might make sense to either have a citizens committee or a consultant to deal with those.
Yeah, so that was the kind of stuff I was hoping the subcommittee would work on. That's a great summary of what I was envisioning that small group of people to do. Pam,
Just quickly, this is a very big picture issue for me. The comment you made, Brian, about there's not enough staff, and therefore we need to offload work by citizens committees and volunteers. And I think that's frankly not a very good way to run a business. I mean, if we have an uptick in significantly complicated work that's a result of this big inflection point we're in with moving off the conventional stuff into important solar and other ways to green our town, and we need staff to do that. And if Dave needs staff, part of the job of the board is to help him acquire it, and to keep internal and maintain expertise for the long term that he can then rely on from perhaps increased staffing. The town has voted to do some very, very heavy lifting to change the way we operate. That seems to me to involve increased staffing for the very organization that is charged with making that happen over the next 50 years. And increasing internal expertise is, I think, a much more long-term solution than offloading, staffing issues to volunteers. I really think we need to think about that.
Any other board comments? So I'd like to get a little straw poll from the board to see where people are on this, because we're at time and I want to keep us on schedule, and I also want some kind of direction. So I'm going to go around. I'm going to ask if people are in favor of a path where we rely on staff to lead this effort, and with the understanding of all the discussion we've had around what that may affect, and the direction of having a small group of citizens be the champions and kind of shepherd this process forward. So I feel that a small group of citizens is a good way to keep attention to this issue, to bring it through, to actually, it is going to require staff to be part of that process, but I think it's going to make it happen. So Warren, where are you? Do you feel that which direction do you feel we should go?
What I feel is I would be willing to kick the can down the road for 2 months, hear a presentation from Dave at the September meeting of where we stand and what is known and what isn't known, and decide at that time whether to implement the Citizens Committee or hire a consultant. But to really get a status report on what the staff already knows and is able to gather by that time, and wait till then.
Okay. Alice, your thoughts?
I guess I believe that a citizens committee can be helpful in doing a lot of the work that won't detract from Dave's staff that have enormous responsibilities at this point with AMS and a whole bunch of other stuff that they're working on. But I think we have to take Dave's recommendations that if he thinks he can do some major piece of this work without the need of a citizen committee, I think maybe we let him see what he can get done and decide at what point we need to hire a consultant. I don't want to duplicate efforts. I don't want to cause more work than what's required of the light plant staff, but they have a very heavy load right now. And I understand Pam's concern about if we don't have the staff, we should go hire it. That in itself is a very long process. You need to present it in a budget, it has to go to town meeting. There's a big deal when you increase staffing to that degree and add people to do things for the light plant. So I guess I would say, if trust Dave and his staff, if they say they can do this work, let them start it and see where they go. My first preference would have been a committee to help with that work, but if they don't need it.
Wendy, your thoughts?
So I'm definitely in support of having Dave take the time to put his thoughts forward. And I would like to see E&E's presentation, because part of our problem is the infrastructure issue that we have, saturation, right? And if this thing that E&E has is the right long-term path, and that changes a lot of things, including battery storage potentially, right? So
yeah.
I do think that we should have that presentation and let Dave and his team do just what he said. Like, Dave doesn't know if he needs a consultant, but much like Warren said, let's figure out what we know already, what we need a little more time with, and then let's figure out where if we do need a consultant, where we leverage one if we need one.
And Pam, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I'm in favor of waiting and hearing what Dave has to say, and see where we are at that point, I've already mentioned my main reasons. I also want to get back, and maybe this becomes something that we need to talk further about, but we need to really think hard about staffing for Dave. I mean, Alice is right, you know, Band-Aids with staffing increases maybe are not going to work because it takes a long time. But back to my inflection point, and that we're adding a lot of work to the light plant, I think maybe we should be encouraging Dave to come to us if there's a need for additional staffing. I find it hard to even contemplate what the town is asking for without increasing the size, the light plant's staff, or switching responsibilities. I also really think that internalizing the learning and building the expertise under these circumstances is very valuable. And so to the extent we can help Dave in any direction you think we should take to build that expertise and build the staff as needed, I think we should hear that. But for now, I'm with Warren, and we should just wait and see what we've got.
Okay. Well, I was very hopeful going into this discussion to get the okay to do a subcommittee and get a group of citizens going. That clearly is not the thought of the board, but I would like to keep it alive in the sense of Warren's suggestion of circling back in 2 months and seeing what the light plant staff can present to us in 2 months. I would also ask Dave for you to invite E&E for our next meeting in August to make that presentation and get the ball rolling. And just a quick show of hands from board members. Do you think that's a good next step? I got it. All right, good. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate the input, and we will follow that plan. So we're about 7 minutes behind, but we're going to move on to the shared charging fees that are collected at public chargers and shared chargers. And Dave, are you going to have Laura lead this?
Yeah, Laura's going to go through it. I'll pull up the presentation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dave and Brian. Okay,
everyone say that.
We had at a previous meeting, we reviewed some data about what's been going on over at the one shared charger that CMLP has out in the field, which is located at Concord Green. We reviewed kind of when people are using the charger, what the utilization rates have been, and how much money CMLP has been collecting. The board and the light plant have received a number of comments from Concord Green citizens as well as others about potentially making changes to those station rates. And so the presentation today is to make some proposed changes to the rates that the board could consider, both at the Concord Green stations as well as the public charging stations around town. Next slide. So what you see here is a summary on the left of what is currently charged, and you'll see 3 different time periods. Those are the 3 time periods at the Concord Green facility, where there's the most expensive price for 2 to 7 p.m., a mid price for 7 to 10 p.m., and then an off-peak price from 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. The public charging stations, in contrast, the ones that you see around town, do not have that mid-tier. They just have a peak and an off-peak. And the reason that there is a third mid-peak tier at Concord Green was to help sharing of that facility. The main reason for the time of use pricing at the public chargers is to discourage charging during the peak when CMLP incurs a lot of costs and greenhouse gas emissions. But at Concord Green, you know, it's a shared charger. It's a residential facility, so people live there. And we thought when we put the chargers in that the 7 to 10 p.m. period would be more popular than other time periods because it would be convenient for people returning from work to plug in at that time. And so in order to improve utilization, we said, well, let's make a higher price then, so that only the people who really appreciate that time period and are willing to pay more use it then, and the other people who are more cost conscious might use the other time periods, which might be less convenient, but at least would be cheaper. So that's the current pricing, 3 to 120 at Concord Green and 3 120 at the public stations. As you know, we implemented a significant increase to the power cost adjustment effective with July 1st for our residential and commercial rates. The public charging station rates were never adjusted by the 90 points of PCA that was voted in at the beginning of the year. And so right now we have the need to add the full 5.9 cents to the rate. That 5.9 cents adds about 40 cents per hour to the hourly rate, based on an assumed maximum delivery of 6.6 kilowatts. So that the new rate for the 2 to 7 p.m. period would be $3.40, and for the 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. would be $1.60. And what we're going to suggest to you here is that because there are many PHEV owners, that's plug-in hybrid electric vehicles at Concord Green, who only can realize an acceptance of delivery rate of like 3.2 kilowatts, they end up paying twice as much for their electricity as those who can accept at 6.6. And so what we're proposing is to eliminate the per hour fee at Concord Green and turn it into a per kilowatt hour fee. So based on the new $3.40 peak pricing and $1.60 off peak pricing, that would translate into a 51 cents per kilowatt hour on peak and a 24 cents per kilowatt hour off peak. And off peak at Concord Green would now be all the way from 7 p.m. to 2 p.m. We would eliminate that evening pricing. And there would be no idle fees at Concord Green. We're not proposing to change the public charging station from a $1 per hour to $1 per kilowatt hour rate. We're proposing to continue to charge $3.40 for on-peak and $1.60 per hour for off-peak charging, which applies as long as you are plugged into the station, whether you're drawing power or not. So if the next slide kind of summarizes what the board needs to consider, should we add the 5.9 cents to the prices charged at all the CMLP-owned charging stations? Should we change the shared charger rate, the one at Concord Green, from $1 per hour parking and energy fee to $1 per kilowatt hour energy fee with no idle fees? The public chargers would remain as an hourly fee, as I said. And then finally, should we eliminate the 7 to 10 p.m. mid-peak rate at the Concord Green shared charger? Next slide. And finally, just sharing with you some updated figures. I had reported when we first looked at this that in 2021, the shared charger at Concord Green was only collecting about half of the required return on investment that was needed. The margin needed for a 7-year payback of our investment in that infrastructure was estimated to be $2,364 a year. And I think I reported to you, we were collecting about half of that. I'm looking at these numbers again. This is not 2021. This is the last 12 months from 7/11/21 to 7/10/22. You can see the top line is the total revenue collected. And the second line is the number of kilowatt hours that were sold. The third line is simply one divided by the other. It shows you how much we were collecting per time period. And then the line below that is interesting because what it shows you is what the dollar per miles per gallon equivalent would be in gasoline. So at the off-peak rate that we were charging, which is approximately 20 cents a kilowatt hour, that represents $1.76 per gallon. And the on-peak rate of 40 cents is $3.64. CMLP has to pay ChargePoint 10% off the top as part of their fee. So even though we collected, say, for example, on the off-peak 20 cents per kilowatt hour, we have to pay them 2 cents. So we only net 18 cents. And then our cost for energy is 8, 9, and 10 cents for those different time periods. And then if we further say that those stations need to collect for distribution as all other meters do, then the what's left over, okay, the revenue that CMLP receives less what we have to pay for energy, less the distribution, is this 12 cents, 5 cents, and 21 cents. And that works out to be $73, $5.29, and 80 on the volumes in line 2. So out of the total we needed to collect, in the last 12 months, we've only collected about $683. If you go to the next page, I've done the same thing here, but I've put in the new pricing. So it's now the 24 cents on the third line down. The dollar per kWh revenue would be the same for the evening and the off peak, because we're collapsing, the mid tier, and the on peak would be 51. So if we raise the rates to account for the higher PCA, then we would end up collecting close to about half of what we need to. So it's still not a full collection, but it gets us closer. And I believe that is the last slide.
Great. So to summarize, the proposed changes are to adjust all the public chargers, the 7 locations that we have for the PCA, and it will still be in dollars per hour, meaning if your car is not charging, you are still paying dollars per hour. But for the shared charger, we're going to convert that to an equivalent value in kilowatt hours. And this will do 2 things. It will allow residents with plug-in hybrids to pay for just the amount of energy they consume rather than the time they're on the charger. It also, without the idle fees, allows for that overnight charging at that residential location. So someone can put their car in the charger. There's no penalty for not actively charging. Now, my concern is people will complain to us that the shared charger is blocked and that someone's not actively charging. But I'm going to hope that the community can figure out a way to manage that rather than a fee structure to force management of that. Because it isn't working today. That's one of the main complaints that I'm hearing is people are complaining they may have to come at 3 in the morning to unplug their car so they don't continue to collect fees. So is there any questions from the board on this new fee structure? Wendy.
I feel like Concord Green might be getting special treatment, but I just want to ask a question. Is this the only place where we have a shared charger for a multi-dwelling unit? Okay, because I know that we originally had a pilot. There were 3 pilots we were looking at, and I know we did Concord Green. I just wasn't sure if there was a second one or not.
Yeah, no, Concord Green is the only shared one that we had. It's part of the demonstration project so we can learn what works and what doesn't. And so that's why we're proposing some changes.
I thought there was the second one. I just lost track of what happened with it. So I definitely think that we need to do the PCA across the board. And, I think we should do this with Concord Green and see what happens. And if people complain, then we'll go back to Concord Green.
Yeah, so
the PCA was applied in those per kilowatt hour rates.
And Wendy, just to be clear, we do have a couple other MDU locations that we gave rebates to for demonstration projects as well. But this is the only one that was a shared charger.
Right. Those were more of a deeded parking spot or a other structures that have meters and are on the EV miles program or on the time of use.
Thank you.
Alice.
So I think this sounds like a reasonable approach and a way that we should go forward. My only question though is when we think about the rates between peak and off peak, we seem to have in our rate structure multiple peak times. And I think is there a reason that we can't be consistent? I believe that the time of use rate for peak hours is 10 p.m. to 7 or 8 in the morning, which isn't the same peak off peak that these rates reflect and maybe other rates around town. So it's for consistency. I think we either know our peak hours or an off peak.
So,
But it's for many of us, it could be confusing.
yeah, so I agree, Alice. The time of use rate that exists, I feel is a legacy, and we've been trying to work on creating at the default time of use rate as its replacement, which would be more accurate with what our load looks like and our expenses are. So rather than changing the times on this fee structure, I'd rather change it on the time of use structure, because that's the one that's inaccurate. But that's my opinion. I'm sorry, it's a hot topic for me. So Laura, if you want to make your comment, or Dave.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Brian, that the current time of use, which has probably only about 50 customers on it, Alice, is a legacy that was defined as 10 p.m. to noon year round, which is sort of easy to remember, but as Brian said, not very reflective of when we actually experience our peaks. And so we could go and try to change all the existing rates to be exactly the same and be more reflective of when our peaks occur. But because we're moving to AMS and because we plan to go to a universal, opt-out time of use rate, I think it would maybe give us a little less to work on if we just accepted the ugliness of the rates that don't agree right now and work on getting the new one perfect. And that'll be our new shiny flagship when we get there, which isn't, by the way, that far away now. As Dave said, we're getting close to signing the contract. And once we do that, we're going to start ordering equipment. Now, when the equipment's going to get here is another question. But anyway, it's not that far off now. So I kind of think that with everything else you guys have going on, it might make sense to just live with the ugliness right now and hope for the uniformity when we get to the new time of use opt-out rate.
That sounds reasonable. I just wanted to raise it as there are inconsistencies in the way our rates are currently constructed, and acknowledging that.
And as soon as we get rid of the pressing issues, we'll go right back to rate philosophy discussion on the agenda, because I very much want to make sure we get those moving. Any other thoughts from the board? So my final thought would be, I think this is a good solution in the sense that this one shared charger was a pilot. It was to try out this. We did apply the public charging fee structure to it, and residents came back with concerns, and I think we've addressed those concerns. I know one of the concerns was that it was more expensive than other public access, other private charging stations in town. That is due to the cost of maintenance and the cost of installation, not receiving a state rebate to subsidize that. We need to collect it in the fees. That's why other stations in town may have a lower per kilowatt hour rate than we were able to offer. But I think we've also shown with those slides that we're still under collecting. We're not. It's not a self-supporting business, and I'd like it to be, but it's currently not, and it's because the competition gets a lot of subsidies in the form of rebates from EVIP or others that make the installation almost cost neutral, and where we spent 10 grand. So we don't have to approve this through a rate hearing because this is a fee, not a rate. But I just want to do a quick straw poll that these changes are agreeable to the board. Alice, do you feel you're agreeable to these changes?
Yeah, I think it seems like it's reasonable to see if we can recoup our costs for this rate structure.
And Wendy? I think you're muted, but it looks like you agree. Warren?
I'm fine with this.
Okay. And Pam?
Yes, and I appreciate the presentations and the roll up. I mean, the thought on this. And yes, I approve.
All right. Well, I did get a reminder by email that I forgot to mention something. I got a notification as chair from the town that our meetings going forward, the ability to do this virtual meeting is that state open meeting law suspension is set to expire tomorrow. And so our August meeting will have to be, as we know it today, will have to be some kind of either hybrid meeting or in-person meeting for August. And that unless the state takes some other action to allow these virtual meetings to continue.
So Brian, could I add to that?
Yeah,
So hybrid is acceptable, but we have to have a quorum live and the chair has to be present. So you could have 2 members virtually.
nice. Thank you for the clarification. So for the August 17th meeting, we should all expect to be at the public hearing room. And if you're unable to make it, let me know so that I can ensure that at least 2 other people or 2 other members are there with me.
And I will have a Zoom set up as well for the hybrid portion.
Excellent. And Wendy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, Brian. So, you know, my office went back to work in Canton. So, and Wednesday is my day in the office. Except for I'm homesick today for a different reason, but in general, I'm going to need to be hybrid because I'll be in Canton. It's too long of a drive to get down there.
Yeah. All right. Alice, Pam, or Warren, do you have any routine Wednesday obligations that may require you to be virtual?
I do not.
I don't.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I thank you for the reminder to mention that because it is important that we show up on the 17th. So looking at the agenda, we're ready to move on to liaison and public comments. So if any of the public or liaisons have a question, please use the raised hand function. David Hessel.
Speaking for Concord Green, thank you very much for making those changes. We appreciate it. Laura, I think you may still have my email. I wondered if you could send me the PowerPoint and then we can get it out to our residents for the change so we can announce it. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Laura, if you don't have my email, I'll send you one and then you can send it back to me.
I have it, David. I can send it to you.
Thank you very much, David.
Excellent. Any other public comments? Mark Howell.
I thought I might weigh in just briefly on a couple of things. On the subject of task forces versus committees, I think that there's real value in both sides of this. I think having just run a task force and also been actively watching what the personnel board task force is doing, I think that as a community, we would be well served if we focused a little bit on that instead of creating committees that exist forever. Give citizens a piece of work to do, ask them to get it done quickly, and move the ball. I really appreciate the idea that there's going to be some kind of a deadline around the around progress for addressing the solar issue and the grid integrity issue. I really can't think of anything that's more important. I think Pam is really right to call out the critical nature of this. We have no reason to expect that the past is going to, that we're going to somehow revert to the way things were. The evidence suggests that the things are only going to get more challenging. Our grid is running in a way that could be considered precarious. The finances of the light board of CMLP, as you've seen, are also somewhat precarious. You're dealing with power cost adjustments on an unprecedented scale, and some of these things really need to be addressed, and that leads me to the staffing thing. Our personnel board as a town is really been underutilized would be the nicest thing one could possibly say about it. But as a community, we need to think really carefully about about what we need in terms of talent and resources to support all these goals that we have. We have resources and we should be prepared to spend them. So I would encourage folks to think very strategically about how much staff we need and how to make sure that we do have the in-house resources. You can see as part of the broadband update, the telecom director recruitment has failed for probably the third or fourth time in a row. That should be a warning signal that there's something wrong with what we're trying to do. And I appreciate the suggestions that Jason has about how to address it. He's right in the sense that the skills that are being looked for may more appropriately be a broadband manager. But we really should be asking ourselves as a community, how come we have so many acting people? How come the sustainability director is a revolving door? Why is it that we, the staff we have, we really value the work that's being done by these people is exceptional. And having worked really closely with a lot of them, I would say that they do it because they're good and fine people who are extremely dedicated to what they do. People like Carol and Laura are really exceptional, but we may be sort of, taking the benefit of the fact that we have some exceptional individuals who choose to work here, maybe not because we're the type of employer that we would like to be. So let's pay attention to staffing. Let's ask citizens when appropriate to do and complete work. And certainly I would be supportive of reducing the number of standing committees, but I also think that citizen involvement can be extremely important in moving the ball. So I just want to make those two comments because I've heard you struggling across multiple meetings with these issues and suggest that, there are other mechanisms that might be involved with those particular topics that could be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Pamela Dritt.
Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. Thank you to the Broadband Committee. I thought it was wonderful what you all did. And I want to remind us that there was a great deal of hesitation in forming the Broadband Committee, feeling like, well, that should be the light board's responsibility. But I think the benefits were really clear. It was a good thing we did it. I think we should do the benefits for a committee on the solar would be just as beneficial, and we would be, I think we absolutely should do it. I think there are expertise in the community available to us, including the petitioner, that can't be done in the open meeting system that the light plant can't the benefit of any other way. And I think it's worthwhile. Also, one question, is it possible to put a link to the packet information in the agenda, like you would have a link to the recordings in the agenda? That would be so useful to us.
We'll take that into consideration. I know that the packet generally goes out pretty close to the meeting, so it may not be something like the agenda goes out every Friday, but the packet tends to come in later because we're working on it. So we'll look into it, Pamela. We'll see if we can't get that posted. I know the broadband updates were posted by Jason. We could do something similar with the director's update, but it may not be prior to the meeting. It's my only concern.
Well, if you could put a link to wherever it is.
I'll forward you the packet from today, Pamela. I know it's not a long-term solution, which is what you're asking, but it'll at least get us through today. Dean.
Hi, Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. Thanks for all the work that this committee is doing to move Article 38's intent forward. I'm really, impressed with the engagement that has occurred meeting to meeting, but there's a lot of talk. So far, all I've heard is a lot of talk. Now, I'm very pleased to hear that Dave's team is working on these problems and that he has a meeting today and that he made the same comment from at the last meeting. What I would appreciate is if he could include in his director's update his status vis-a-vis the Article 38 meetings and progress that he is making behind the scenes. So that would be helpful because there's no visibility from my point of view on that progress. The other thing that was mentioned is that E&E has a presentation available that describes how we would be able to backfeed the grid. I would be very pleased if the light board could get access to that and could make that a link to that public so that I could see that. So those are my comments. I'm very happy to see that the engagement with the board is robust, and I really hope to see future updates and progress. Thanks.
Great. So yes, Dean, we're going to have them present on the August 17th meeting, that E&E presentation. So we can look into making sure that's publicly available, again, along with Pamela Dritt's comments about that. So I want to talk to Dave offline about his comfort with that process before I make any plans going forward. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to share? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Wendy.
I was gonna say so move. I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I'll second.
We have a second. Great. I'm going to go around. Pam Hill,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
and I agree as well. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in a month.